The air inside the delivery room buzzed with urgency and anticipation. Weng lay on the hospital bed, her face pale but determined. Her stepmother, Agnes, sat just outside, her fingers intertwined nervously as she waited for news. Agnes was not Weng's biological mother, but her love for the young woman was as deep as if she were. She had been a steadfast presence in Weng's life, especially now as she faced the daunting challenge of giving birth to triplets. Only hours earlier, Weng had gone into labor unexpectedly while shopping for baby clothes at a boutique. Agnes had rushed her to the hospital, her heart pounding with worry. Now, she sat surrounded by uncertainty, praying silently for Weng's safety and the safe delivery of the babies. Suddenly, the sound of hurried footsteps broke the tense silence. Senor Arnulfo and Greg Saavedra arrived almost simultaneously, their faces etched with concern. They hurried to Agnes, who rose to meet them with an anxious expression. "Han, what happened?" Greg asked, his voice strained. "Is Weng okay? Is she giving birth now?" "Yes," Agnes replied, her voice trembling. "It all happened so fast. Her stomach began cramping, and I didn't know what else to do but rush her here." Senor Arnulfo placed a comforting hand on Agnes's shoulder. "Did you bring everything for the babies?" he asked, his voice steady but tinged with worry. Agnes nodded. "I brought what I could. I just pray everything goes well. She's delivering 3 babies, and I'm so worried about her." As time passed, more family members arrived at the hospital. Weng's siblings, RJ and Sam, came in looking anxious, followed shortly by Brian, a close family friend. Brian's concern for Weng was evident. Though he knew Weng's heart belonged to Ethan, the father of her children, his feelings for her had never faded. The atmosphere in the hospital corridor grew heavier with each passing minute. Everyone was acutely aware of the risks involved in Weng's delivery. Triplets were a blessing, but the process was fraught with complications. The silence was broken by the first faint cry of a baby. The sound echoed through the hallway, bringing an immediate wave of relief and joy to the waiting family. Tears streamed down Agnes's face as she clutched Senor Arnulfo's arm. "The first one," Agnes whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Moments later, another cry pierced the air, followed by a third, softer but no less precious. The triplets had arrived, their cries filling the hospital with the promise of new life. Agnes's love for the babies shone in her tear-filled eyes. Though they were not her biological grandchildren, she felt an unbreakable bond with them. Senor Arnulfo, too, was overcome with emotion, his normally stoic demeanor giving way to tears of gratitude. Inside the delivery room, Weng was exhausted but overjoyed. The sight of her 3 newborns, 2 boys and a girl, filled her heart with a mix of awe and love. Despite the physical toll, she smiled through her tears as the nurses brought her babies to her. Agnes and the rest of the family were finally allowed inside to see Weng. The room was filled with quiet awe as they gathered around the new mother and her babies. Brian stood at the back, his emotions warring within him. While he was overjoyed for Weng, he couldn't help but feel the sting of unrequited love. "Weng, you did it," Agnes said, her voice filled with pride. "You brought 3 beautiful babies into the world. They're perfect." Weng looked at her stepmother, her eyes glistening with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mama," she said softly. As the family celebrated the arrival of the triplets, thoughts of Ethan lingered in the background. His absence was a sore point, especially for Weng. She had hoped he would be there for the birth of their children, but he remained nowhere to be found. The days following the birth of Weng's triplets were a whirlwind. The hospital room became a revolving door of family members, well-wishers, and nurses tending to the newborns. Weng, though physically drained, couldn't help but marvel at her 3 little miracles. The tiny bundles, 2 boys and a girl, seemed to hold her entire world in their tiny fists. Agnes remained by her side, her maternal instincts in full force as she fussed over Weng and the babies. "You need rest, Weng," she said firmly, fluffing the pillows behind her stepdaughter's back. "These little ones are beautiful, but they'll need a strong mother." Weng smiled weakly. "I can't stop looking at them, Mama. They're so perfect. Brian visited daily, his presence a steadying comfort. Though his feelings for Weng remained unspoken, his actions spoke volumes. He brought meals, helped Agnes with the babies, and even stayed late into the night when Weng needed support. "Brian," Weng said one evening, her voice tinged with gratitude, "you've done so much for me. I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to thank me," he replied gently. "I care about you, Weng, and I care about these little ones too. I'll always be here for you." His words warmed her heart, but they also reminded her of Ethan's absence. Where was he? Why hadn't he come to see their children? As Weng adjusted to motherhood, memories of Ethan began to surface more frequently. She recalled their whirlwind romance, the stolen moments, the promises whispered under starlit skies. She had believed in their love, but his sudden disappearance had left her feeling abandoned and betrayed. Agnes noticed the shadow of sadness in Weng's eyes. One afternoon, as they sat together in the nursery, she broached the topic delicately. "Weng," she began, "have you thought about reaching out to Ethan?" Weng hesitated, her hands gently rocking her daughter's cradle. "I've thought about it," she admitted, "but he left without a word, Mama. If he cared, wouldn't he be here?" Agnes sighed, placing a comforting hand on Weng's shoulder. "People make mistakes, Weng. Sometimes they don't realize what they've lost until it's too late. But remember, you're not alone in this. We're all here for you." Meanwhile, Brian struggled with his own emotions. He knew Weng's heart wasn't his to claim, yet he couldn't ignore the bond he felt with her and the babies. Watching her navigate motherhood with such grace only deepened his admiration for her. One crisp morning, as Weng strolled through the hospital garden with her babies, she encountered someone she hadn't expected to see, Ethan. He stood by the fountain, his hands in his pockets, his expression a mix of guilt and longing. Weng froze, her heart pounding. The sight of him brought a rush of emotions, anger, hurt, and an undeniable flicker of love. "Ethan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He turned to her, his eyes immediately locking onto the stroller. The sight of the three tiny faces peeking out seemed to knock the breath out of him. "They're mine?" he asked, his voice unsteady. Weng's eyes narrowed. "Yes, they're yours. But where were you, Ethan? Where were you when I needed you the most?" Ethan stepped closer, his gaze pleading. "Weng, I made mistakes. I was scared, of commitment, of failing you. But I'm here now. I want to be a part of their lives." Her heart wavered, torn between the love she had once felt for him and the pain of his abandonment. "It's not just about me, Ethan. These babies need stability. They need someone they can count on." "I'll prove it to you," he said firmly. "I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust again." Their conversation was interrupted by Brian, who approached with a protective air. He stood beside Weng, his presence a silent declaration of support. Ethan's eyes flickered to Brian, and an unspoken tension passed between them. The encounter left Weng more conflicted than ever. Could she trust Ethan to step up as a father? Or was it too late for him to reclaim his place in their lives? Ethan's reappearance threw Weng's world into turmoil. That evening, she sat in the nursery, watching her triplets sleep peacefully. Their tiny breaths filled the room, but her mind raced with questions. Ethan's sudden return stirred emotions she thought she buried: hurt, anger, and the faint flicker of a love that refused to die. Agnes entered the room quietly, carrying a warm cup of tea. She placed it on the table beside Weng and pulled up a chair. "You've been quiet all day," Agnes said gently. "What's on your mind, Anik?" Weng sighed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "It's Ethan. Seeing him again, I don't know what to feel. Part of me wants to believe he's changed, but how can I trust him after what he did?" Agnes placed a reassuring hand on Weng's knee. "It's not an easy decision, but remember, you hold all the power now. Think about what's best for you and the babies. You're not alone in this." Meanwhile, Ethan found himself wrestling with guilt. As he sat in a dimly lit hotel room, his mind replayed the moment he saw Weng with their children. He had been a coward, running away from responsibilities he wasn't ready to face. Now, he was determined to make amends. The next morning, Ethan showed up at Weng's home unannounced, carrying a bouquet of flowers and a determined expression. Agnes opened the door, her gaze scrutinizing him. "What do you want, Ethan?" she asked coldly. "I want to see Weng," he replied. "I want to apologize and prove that I'm here for her and the babies." Agnes hesitated, but eventually stepped aside. "You have 5 minutes. Don't make me regret this." Ethan found Weng in the living room, cradling one of the babies. She looked up, her expression guarded. "Why are you here, Ethan?" she asked. "To make things right," he said, his voice steady. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm ready to fight for you and our children." Brian watched the unfolding events from the sidelines, his heart aching. He had always been there for Weng, offering her support and friendship, even as he harbored feelings he knew she might never return. Seeing Ethan re-enter her life ignited a mix of jealousy and fear. One evening, Brian found Weng in the garden, sitting on a bench with the baby stroller beside her. The moonlight bathed her in a soft glow, highlighting the fatigue etched on her face. "You look like you could use a break," Brian said, sitting beside her. Weng smiled faintly. "It's been a lot." Brian hesitated before speaking. "Weng, I need to ask you something. Do you really believe Ethan can change? That he can be the father these babies deserve?" Weng looked at him, her eyes searching his face. "I don't know, Brian. I want to believe he can, but trusting him again feels impossible." Brian's hand found hers, a gesture of comfort and quiet longing. "Whatever you decide, I'll be here. You and those babies mean the world to me." His words lingered in the air, unspoken feelings weaving a fragile bond between them. Ethan's attempts to prove himself were met with skepticism from Weng's family. Agnes, in particular, kept a close watch on him, her protective instincts on high alert. One day, Ethan surprised everyone by arriving with a meticulously planned schedule for co-parenting. He outlined how he intended to contribute to the baby's upbringing, from financial support to hands-on care. "This isn't just talk, Weng," he said, handing her the folder. "I'm committed to being a part of their lives." Weng studied the documents, impressed by the effort he had put in. Still, doubt lingered. "Words and plans are easy, Ethan. Actions are what matter." To prove his sincerity, Ethan began spending time with the babies under Agnes's watchful eye. He learned how to change diapers, feed them, and soothe their cries. His fumbling attempts often drew laughter, but they also showed his genuine desire to step up. Brian, however, couldn't shake the feeling that Ethan's return might disrupt the fragile stability Weng had built. One afternoon, he confronted Ethan outside the house. "What are you really after, Ethan?" Brian asked, his tone sharp. "If you're here to play hero and then leave again, don't bother." Ethan met his gaze evenly. "I know I messed up, but I'm not the same man who left Weng. I love her, and I want to be a father to my kids. Whether you like it or not, I'm here to stay." The tension between them simmered, an unspoken rivalry forming as both men vied for a place in Weng's life. As the days passed, Weng found herself torn between two men. One who had broken her heart but was trying to redeem himself, and another who had been her unwavering support through it all. The decision loomed over her, a choice that would shape not only her future but that of her children as well. Ethan knew regaining Weng's trust would be his most challenging battle. He began showing up at her home daily, not as an uninvited guest but as a father eager to bond with his children. He brought toys, clothes, and baby essentials, but his most significant contribution was his time and effort. One morning, Agnes allowed him to join Weng for the triplets checkup. The visit to the pediatrician was chaotic but revealing. Ethan struggled to carry the diaper bag, handle one crying baby, and juggle the demands of the other two. Yet, despite the challenges, his determination shone through. "Do you think Ethan can manage?" Agnes whispered to Weng as they watched him fumble with a bottle. Weng bit her lip, uncertain. "He's trying, Agnes. I can see that. But it's going to take more than a few good days to erase the past." After the checkup, Ethan surprised everyone by suggesting they have lunch together. Over a simple meal at a quiet cafe, he shared stories of his time away, admitting his regrets and mistakes. "I was scared, Weng," he confessed. "I ran because I didn't know how to face the responsibility. But being away from you and the kids, it was the worst decision of my life." Weng listened silently, her heart conflicted. She wanted to believe him, but the wounds of abandonment were still fresh. While Ethan worked to prove himself, Brian struggled with his feelings. His role as Weng's confidant had always been clear, but Ethan's return blurred the lines. One evening, Brian invited Weng to a small gathering at his house. He had prepared a simple dinner, hoping to give her a break from the daily grind. As the evening progressed, their conversation turned to Ethan. "Do you think he's genuine this time?" Brian asked, pouring them both a glass of wine. Weng hesitated, swirling the liquid in her glass. "He's trying, Brian. I can see the effort, but I'm scared. What if he leaves again?" Brian reached across the table, taking her hand. "If he does, I'll be here. You know that, right?" His words lingered, heavy with unspoken emotions. Weng pulled her hand back gently, unsure of how to respond. "Brian, you've been my rock through all of this, but I need to figure out what's best for me and the babies. It's not just about what I feel, it's about their future." Brian nodded, masking his disappointment. He knew she was right, but it didn't make it any easier to accept. Ethan's persistence began to pay off. He spent every free moment learning how to care for the triplets, even taking parenting classes to improve his skills. Agnes, initially skeptical, started to soften toward him as she observed his efforts. "He's surprising me," she admitted to Weng one evening. "I didn't think he'd stick around this long. Maybe he really has changed." Weng, however, remained cautious. Her walls were built high, and it would take more than Ethan's determination to break them down. One weekend, Ethan suggested a family outing to the park. He wanted to create memories with his children and show Weng that he was committed to being a present father. Weng reluctantly agreed, and the day turned out to be a surprising success. Ethan played with the babies, pushed their stroller, and even managed to coax a laugh out of Weng with his clumsy attempts at entertaining them. For a brief moment, it felt like they were a real family. As the sun set, Ethan turned to Weng. "Thank you for today. It means the world to me to spend time with all of you." Weng looked at him, her resolve softening. "I'm not saying I forgive you, Ethan, but maybe there's a chance for us to move forward. For the kids." Ethan's eyes lit up with hope. "That's all I'm asking for, a chance." But as they returned home, Brian was waiting, his expression unreadable. Seeing Ethan and Weng together stirred an ache in his chest. He greeted them politely, but the tension between him and Ethan was palpable. Inside, Weng sensed the silent rivalry brewing between the two men. She knew she had to address it, but for now, her priority was her children. As she tucked the triplets into bed that night, Weng whispered softly, "One day, we'll figure this out. I promise." Ethan's persistence in rebuilding a connection with Weng was slowly bearing fruit, but the shadows of the past loomed large over their budding reconciliation. One evening, Weng sat on the porch, gazing at the stars while the triplets slept soundly. The night air carried a sense of calm, but her thoughts were anything but peaceful. "Mind if I join you?" Ethan's voice broke her reverie. She glanced at him and nodded. He settled into the chair beside her, the silence between them heavy with unspoken words. "I know I have a lot to make up for," Ethan began, his tone sincere. "But I need you to know something, Weng. When I left, it wasn't because I didn't care. I was scared, terrified of becoming my father." Weng turned to him, surprised by his vulnerability. "Your father?" Ethan hesitated before continuing. "My father was never there for me. He abandoned my mother when I was just a kid. I didn't want to repeat his mistakes, but in trying to avoid them, I ended up doing the same thing to you." His confession stirred something within her. For the first time, she saw the man behind the facade, the man struggling with his own demons. "Ethan, it's not just about you anymore," she said softly. It's about the triplets. They deserve a father who won't run away when things get tough. Ethan nodded, determination etched on his face. I promise you, Weng, I'm not running anymore. While Ethan worked tirelessly to prove his worth, Brian's feelings for Weng reached a boiling point. One afternoon, he found her in the kitchen, preparing a meal for the triplets. Weng, we need to talk, Brian said, his voice tinged with urgency. She paused, wiping her hands on a towel. What is it, Brian? I can't keep pretending that I'm okay with all of this, he admitted. Seeing you with Ethan, watching him try to win you back, it's killing me, Weng. I've been here for you through everything, and yet you're giving him another chance. Weng looked at him, her heart aching at the raw pain in his eyes. Brian, you've been my rock, and I'll always be grateful for that. But this isn't just about me. It's about the kids. They deserve to have their father in their lives. And what about you? Brian pressed. What do you deserve, Weng? Do you think he can give you the love and stability you need? She hesitated, unsure of how to answer. I don't know, Brian, but I have to try, for the triplets. Brian sighed, running a hand through his hair. I can't stand by and watch this anymore. If he hurts you again, Weng, I won't be able to forgive him, or myself for not doing more. With that, he left, leaving Weng torn between the two men who cared for her in different ways. Ethan, determined to show Weng that he could be a responsible father, planned a surprise outing for her and the triplets. Early one morning, he arrived at her house with a rented van packed with everything they might need. A picnic basket, toys for the babies, and even a portable crib. Where are we going? Weng asked, eyeing him suspiciously. You'll see, Ethan replied with a grin. The drive took them to a serene lakeside park. The gentle breeze and the sound of rustling leaves created a tranquil atmosphere. Ethan spread out a blanket under a large tree, and one couldn't help but admire the effort he'd put into the day. The triplets giggled as Ethan played with them, their laughter ringing out across the park. Weng watched, her heart softening as she saw how natural he was with the babies. Ethan, she said after a while, you're good with them. He looked at her, his expression serious. I'm trying, Weng. I know I've let you down before, but I want to be here for you and the kids. I want us to be a family. Her chest tightened at his words. It's not that simple, Ethan. Trust isn't something you can rebuild overnight. I know, he said, reaching for her hand, but I'm willing to put in the work, for as long as it takes. For the first time, Weng allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to move forward. Ethan's efforts to reconnect with Weng and the triplets intensified. He was determined to show her that he was more than just words, that he could be a dependable father and partner. One morning, Ethan showed up at Weng's doorstep with a stack of parenting books and a nervous smile. What are those? Weng asked, raising an eyebrow as she balanced a bottle for one of the babies. I thought I'd better educate myself, Ethan said sheepishly. I mean, I can't just wing it with 3 babies, right? Weng couldn't help but smile at his sincerity. Well, good luck. They don't exactly come with instruction manuals. Ethan stayed the entire day, feeding, changing, and soothing the triplets while Weng supervised. By the end of the evening, he was exhausted but elated. You did well today, Weng said, surprising herself. Ethan grinned, his confidence bolstered. Thanks, but I've got a long way to go. These little ones are tough critics. As Weng tucked the babies into their cribs, Ethan lingered by the door. I mean it, Weng. I'm not giving up on us. Not on you, not on them. Her heart softened, but she wasn't ready to let her guard down completely. We'll see, Ethan. Actions speak louder than words. Brian's love for Weng remained steadfast, but her growing connection with Ethan became too much for him to bear. One evening, he called Weng to meet him at their usual spot, a quiet cafe in town. When she arrived, she could see the turmoil in his eyes. Brian, what's going on? He took a deep breath, his hands clasped tightly around his coffee mug. Weng, I think it's time for me to step back. She blinked in surprise. What do you mean? I've been holding on to this hope that maybe, one day, you'd choose me. But I see how hard Ethan is trying, and I see the way you look at him. I can't compete with that, Brian said, his voice filled with resignation. Weng reached across the table, her hand covering his. Brian, you've been my rock through everything. I don't want to lose you. You won't lose me, he assured her, though his voice wavered. But I need to let you figure this out without me in the way. Tears welled in her eyes. You've done so much for me, Brian. I'll always be grateful. He gave her a bittersweet smile. You deserve to be happy, Weng. Just promise me you'll make the right choice, for yourself and the triplets. As Brian walked away that night, Weng felt the weight of his absence and the complexity of her emotions. Life began to settle into a new rhythm, but Weng couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Ethan's dedication was unwavering, and he spent every moment he could with her and the triplets. One evening, as the babies slept peacefully, Ethan and Weng sat on the porch. The air was cool, and the sky was painted with hues of orange and pink from the setting sun. I've been thinking a lot lately, Ethan began, his voice hesitant. About what? Weng asked, sipping her tea. About everything I've put you through. About the life I want for us, he said, turning to face her. She met his gaze, her heart pounding. And what do you want, Ethan? He took her hand in his eyes earnest. I want a life with you, Weng. I want to be a father to our kids, a partner you can rely on. I want to prove to you that I'm not the man who walked away. I've changed. His words hung in the air, and Weng felt a surge of emotions. Hope, fear, and a flicker of something she hadn't felt in a long time. I don't know if I can trust you completely yet, she admitted. I understand, Ethan said, squeezing her hand gently, but I'm not going anywhere this time. I'll spend the rest of my life proving to you that I'm worthy of your trust. As they sat together, a tentative peace settled between them. For the first time in a long while, Weng allowed herself to imagine a future where they could be a family. Not perfect, but together. The days turned into weeks, and Weng began to notice a significant change in Ethan. He wasn't just showing up for appearances. He was becoming an integral part of their lives. From late-night diaper changes to early morning feedings, he was there. One rainy afternoon, Ethan arrived at Weng's house with a surprise. He carried a large box inside and set it on the dining table. What's this? Weng asked, curious but wary. I've been working on something, he said, opening the box to reveal handmade photo albums and personalized baby journals. Each journal had the name of one of their triplets embossed on the cover. Inside were spaces for milestones, pictures, and little notes. I thought it would be nice to document their journey, Ethan explained, scratching the back of his neck nervously, so we don't miss a moment. Weng's heart swelled with emotion. She ran her fingers over the smooth leather covers, tears threatening to spill. Ethan, it's beautiful. He smiled, relieved by her reaction. I just want them to have something to look back on when they're older, something that shows how much they're loved. The gesture touched Weng deeply, and for the first time, she began to see the possibility of a future with Ethan, not just as a co-parent, but as a partner. Despite his decision to step back, Brian couldn't stay away for long. He returned one evening, unannounced, carrying a small gift for the triplets. When Weng opened the door, she was surprised to see him standing there. His usual confident demeanor softened. Brian, she said, blinking in surprise. What are you doing here? I couldn't stay away, he admitted. I missed the little ones, and you. Weng hesitated, unsure of how to respond. Come in. The babies are napping, but you can see them. As Brian stepped inside, he noticed the subtle changes in the house. Ethan's presence was evident. From the stack of parenting books on the coffee table to the photo albums neatly arranged on a shelf, it was clear that Ethan had been making an effort. I see Ethan's been busy, Brian remarked, trying to keep his tone neutral. Weng nodded, sensing the underlying tension. He's been trying really hard. For the kids. And for you? Brian asked, his gaze piercing. She looked away, not ready to confront the feelings swirling inside her. "Brian, I appreciate everything you've done for me, but I need to figure this out on my own." Brian nodded, though it was clear he was hurting. "I just want you to be happy, Weng. That's all I've ever wanted." As he left, Weng felt a pang of guilt and confusion. Brian had been her anchor during some of her darkest moments, but Ethan was now becoming the man she once hoped he could be. Ethan decided it was time to make his intentions clear. He invited Weng and the triplets to his family estate for the weekend, hoping to create new memories and show her how serious he was about their future. When they arrived, the sprawling gardens and warm, inviting interior of the house took Weng by surprise. It was a stark contrast to the man who once seemed so distant and unapproachable. During dinner, Ethan's uncle, Senor Arnulfo, pulled Weng aside. "He's changed, hasn't he?" Weng glanced at Ethan, who was feeding one of the babies with a gentle smile. "Yes, he has." The older man nodded, his eyes softening. "He's been through a lot, Weng, but you've brought out the best in him. Don't let fear hold you back." Later that evening, as the triplets slept peacefully, Ethan led Weng to the garden. The moonlight cast a soft glow over the flowers, and the air was filled with the scent of jasmine. "I wanted to thank you for coming," Ethan said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "It's been nice," Weng admitted. "The kids loved it." He took her hands in his gaze unwavering. "Weng, I know I've made mistakes, but I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. I love you, and I love our children. I want us to be a family, not just for them, but for us." Her breath hitched as she looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity in his words. "Ethan, I don't know if I can do this. There's so much history, so much pain." "I know," he said softly, "but I'm willing to spend the rest of my life making it right. Just give me a chance." As Weng stood there, the weight of her fears and doubts began to lift. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future with Ethan, a future where love and forgiveness could pave the way for a new beginning. The weekend at Ethan's family estate marked a turning point for Weng. She began to see Ethan's efforts not as an obligation, but as a genuine attempt to win her heart and be a father to their children. However, her lingering doubts made her hesitant to fully embrace the possibility of a future with him. Back in the city, Ethan became more involved in their daily lives. From attending pediatric checkup to helping Weng with the triplets' nightly routines, he immersed himself in their world. Despite his busy schedule, he always found time to be present for his family. One evening, as Weng sat in the nursery, soothing one of the babies back to sleep, Ethan entered quietly. He leaned against the doorway, watching her with a soft smile. "You're incredible," he said, his voice low and sincere. Weng turned to face him, a small smile playing on her lips. "It's not easy, but it's worth it." Ethan approached, taking the baby from her arms and settling them into the crib. As they stood side by side, the silence between them was filled with unspoken emotions. "Weng," Ethan began, his voice tinged with vulnerability, "I know I can't undo the mistakes I've made, but I want to make things right. Not just for the kids, but for you too." Her eyes met his, and for the first time, she saw a man who was willing to fight for their family. "Ethan, I appreciate everything you've been doing, but it's not just about effort, it's about trust, and that takes time." He nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "Then I'll wait. However long it takes, I'll be here." Brian had been a constant presence in Weng's life, even as he tried to respect her boundaries. One afternoon, he invited her to meet him at a quiet cafe. Curious and slightly apprehensive, Weng agreed. As they sat across from each other, Brian's usual confident demeanor was replaced with a somber expression. "Weng," he began, his voice steady but laced with emotion, "I need to tell you something." She leaned forward, sensing the gravity of his words. "What is it?" "I've been offered a position overseas," he said, watching her reaction closely. "It's a great opportunity, and I think I need to take it." Weng's heart sank, but she masked her emotions. "That's amazing, Brian. You deserve it." "I'm not leaving because of the job," he admitted, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'm leaving because I need to move on. Staying here, being close to you, it's not fair to either of us." Tears welled up in Weng's eyes as she reached across the table to take his hand. "Brian, you've been such an important part of my life. I'll always be grateful for everything you've done for me and the kids." He smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I'll always care about you, Weng, but it's time for me to let go." As they parted ways, Weng felt a mix of sadness and relief. Brian's departure marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. With Brian's decision to leave, Weng found herself reflecting on her own feelings. The weight of uncertainty that had plagued her for so long began to lift, replaced by a sense of clarity. Ethan continued to prove his commitment, not through grand gestures, but through the small, consistent actions that spoke volumes. He cooked breakfast for Weng and the kids, stayed up late to soothe crying babies, and even took time to learn how to braid Weng's hair during one of their rare quiet moments. One evening, Ethan invited Weng to dinner at a cozy restaurant. As they sat by the window, the warm glow of candlelight illuminating their faces, he took her hand in his. "I wanted to thank you," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "For what?" she asked, her brows furrowing in confusion. "For giving me a chance to be part of your life," he replied. "You and the kids mean everything to me, and I don't take that for granted." Weng smiled, her heart swelling with affection. "You've come a long way, Ethan, and I'm proud of you." As they shared a quiet moment, Weng realized that the walls she had built around her heart were slowly crumbling. She wasn't ready to declare her love just yet, but she knew she was heading in that direction. That night, as they returned home, Ethan carried one of the triplets in his arms, while Weng held the other two. The sight of their little family filled Weng with a sense of hope she hadn't felt in years. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of a happy ending. Ethan had been planning something special for weeks. He knew that winning Weng's heart required more than persistence. It demanded sincerity, patience, and a gesture that showed how deeply he valued her and their family. One evening, he asked Weng to accompany him to the park near their neighborhood. It was a quiet spot she often visited with the triplets, a place that had become her sanctuary. As they strolled along the path, Ethan carried two of the babies while Weng held the third. The golden light of the setting sun bathed them in warmth, and the laughter of their children filled the air. "Weng," Ethan began, his tone nervous yet resolute, "there's something I've been meaning to ask you." She turned to him, her expression curious. "What is it?" Ethan stopped walking and gently placed the babies in the stroller they'd brought along. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Weng's breath hitched as she realized what was happening. "Ethan, I know I've made mistakes," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "But I've also learned so much. You've taught me what it means to love selflessly, to put family first. I don't want to just be the father of our children. I want to be your partner, your confidant, your everything." He opened the box, revealing a simple yet elegant diamond ring. "Weng Ramos, will you marry me? Not out of obligation, but out of love." Tears welled up in Weng's eyes as she stared at the man before her. The sincerity in his words, the love in his gaze. It was all too much. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I've seen how much you've changed. You've shown me that you're willing to fight for us, not just for the children but for me. And I love you." With those words, she nodded, her smile radiant. "Yes, Ethan, I'll marry you." Cheers erupted from the nearby trees as their families, who had been hiding, emerged with cameras and flowers. The triplets gurgled happily, as if sensing the joyous moment. Preparations for the wedding began immediately, but Weng and Ethan decided to keep it simple and intimate. They wanted a ceremony that reflected their journey, filled with love, resilience, and the importance of family. On a crisp spring morning, surrounded by loved ones, Weng walked down the aisle wearing a flowing white gown. Her stepmother held her hand, tears streaming down her face as she gave Weng away. Ethan stood at the altar, his eyes locked on Weng as if she were the only person in the world. The triplets, dressed in matching outfits, were carried by Ethan's sister and Weng's brother, stealing the show with their giggles. As they exchanged vows, the emotions in the room were palpable. Ethan promised to cherish Weng and their children, to always put their happiness first, and to continue growing as a husband and father. Weng, in turn, vowed to trust Ethan, to let go of past fears, and to build a life filled with love and laughter together. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Ethan pulled Weng into a kiss that spoke volumes about their love and commitment. The reception was a joyful celebration. Friends and family toasted to the couple's happiness, and the triplets were doted on by everyone. Brian, who had returned for the occasion, gave a heartfelt speech, wishing them a lifetime of happiness and emphasizing the strength of Weng's heart. As the night drew to a close, Weng and Ethan sat on a bench under the twinkling lights, watching their children sleep in a nearby bassinet. "This feels like a dream," Weng said, leaning her head on Ethan's shoulder. "It's our dream," Ethan replied, wrapping an arm around her, "and I promise to spend every day making it better." In that moment, surrounded by love and the promise of a bright future, Weng knew she had finally found her home, with Ethan and their children, her family. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the story. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more delightful stories.